So our next panel today, we have well, it's not a panel. This is our keynote speaker, and he's a good friend of mine, and we've been working for the last 10 years on everything from legalizing to decriminalizing ethnobotanicals, cannabis, and let me get this picture in here. Because the archaic laws, thank you guys, thank you. You know, the archaic laws that have been in existence in our country and all around the world have prevented many individuals from seeking the use of these tools, whether they're psychoactives or psychedelics. One of the most widely used psychoactives in the world is caffeine, and we have no problem using that. And we used to compare that to the use of cannabis or THC. So when we first started, cannabis was illegal in our state of Florida. Now we do have a medical program here. And our keynote speaker, I thought I saw him in the back, Mike Minardi, is going to be here today and talk about what we're doing on a state level, on a local level, to not only change the laws, but to help decriminalize the activities that healers are using in this space currently. Mike, are you around? Where'd you go? He went to the bathroom? All right, so I'll fill some space for him until he gets here. But Mike Minardi, he headed up Regulate Florida. I don't know if you remember Regulate Florida, but that was an initiative to help to legalize medical or adult use cannabis here in Florida. He's worked extensively on Amendment 2 for the last, in 2014 and 2016, to help to change the medical marijuana laws. He's at the forefront of psychedelics as well as ethnobotanicals and how we can change the laws and change the rules that exist today from either our local standpoint, our state standpoint, as well as our federal standpoint. And with that being said, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Mike Minardi.
Hello, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here at Cannadelic, the true Cannadelic, and thank you very much, Pete, for throwing this and doing these wonderful events and bringing education and evolution to the society here in this country and Florida. Just waiting here. So if you don't know me, my name is Michael Minardi. I'm an attorney in the state of Florida. I've been practicing for about 20 years now, 22 years now actually. Kind of, you know, never want to admit your age sometimes, right? But we embrace it and we love it. I became an attorney, you know, really to legalize cannabis, psychedelics, and as we move forward, I think the evolution comes to the case for legalization of drugs. We are in a time where this world and this country is absolutely insane. We are bleeding money, everyone is struggling, and it's time for a paradigm shift. And I hope that this can educate you and illuminate you on why it's time for a change and why we need to come together for this movement. So again, Michael Minardi, we have a Deep in Nature retreat. You know, I definitely support psychedelics. We're honored to host BioBloom at our place. They are great, but we 100% support, you know, evolution of the mind and soul, and I don't believe under any circumstances our government should control us in that. We also sell plants, so we also have a nursery. We grow hemp plants, so if you ever want to get a hemp license for your home, you can do it. Let's find out how, and you can start cultivating hemp. But we're really about nature, about kind of getting back to this evolution of humanity and, you know, sort of a more back to nature, back to community is exactly what they were talking about. You know, we are all connected and we got to realize that more and more. So the Declaration of Independence declares that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that was the foundation of how this country became. And that, I think, is what we have to get back to, our constitutional principles. And the Ninth Amendment says the enumeration in their Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed or denied or disparage others retained by the people. That means that the government should not be able to take away these rights that are endowed in us by our Creator, whoever that may be to you. The bottom line is we're put here or we're here for some reason. But whatever you believe in, you should have those rights. These are human rights. These are human nature rights that I believe in. And honestly, the first time I kind of started regaining this thought was studying with my son. It was like his 6th or 7th grade history book. And they were talking about, like, you know, the history of the Constitution and the founders and how they believed that nature was always free. Nature was always a right of the people. And so I thought it was very interesting what they were being taught, you know, in 7th grade compared to the reality of where we are today. So these are the principles that I espouse. I'm fighting, and I'm going to be starting to fight this stuff legally on this. But let's talk about the failure of the drug war, right? Because that's really, you know, why we're here, why we have people's lives destroyed, why we have people arrested. Arrests in the United States have increased 171% from 1980 to 2018. And I can tell you, you know, when we had a private prison contract here up for the legislature in Florida, the contract required a 91% occupancy rate. So it's like, we have to guarantee we're going to fill those jails for you, or we're going to pay you anyway. So, and those are things that are going on constantly and consistently. The ACLU reports we spend over $47 billion, we wish $47, right? Annually on the war on drugs. We could, you know, fund Ukraine with this. Not that we want to. So since the war on drugs started in the 1970s, the US government has spent over $1 trillion on the drug war, on incarceration, on law enforcement, on destroying people's lives and their communities and their families. This is an interesting graph I put together because I think we have to have the reality of it, right? We're in a situation where everyone's like, opiate tests, they're destroying the world, they're so bad, and drugging is so bad, it's having a huge impact on our society. But the question is it really? And I don't think so. My position is it does not. Look at this. Alcohol, 95,000. That doesn't change. Tobacco, something I was touched by. My mom died in 2002 of lung cancer. 480,000 people a year. And we're not putting that cat in the bag. Healthcare infections. So these are, and I throw this in there because I just think it's a crazy statistic. Because look at it. It's almost the same amount of people that die from drug overdoses. So what healthcare infections are when you go to the hospital and you get a disease while you're there. From the hospital. You don't, and you die. The same amount as drug overdoses. I've never seen a report on that in the media. Anybody? You seen a report on that? No. Hypocrisy. And one of my favorite songs for a lot of this stuff is Violent Femmes, America's the Home of the Hypocrite. And, you know, obesity, diabetes, and it's just an issue. You know, I am personally of the opinion that now our doctors have to start with, instead of a pill, a prescription for eating right, for exercising, for doing things differently, because I do believe that we can avoid a lot of these situations and issues. And now when we look at drug overdose deaths, 70% of those, 7 out of 10 people, are opiates. And I mean, I don't even know if I consider that a legal drug. You know, like, is it? It's given to us by the pharmaceutical companies. It's not necessarily like cocaine or heroin or any of those. You know, it's one that is prescribed, created by the pharmaceutical companies who have now spent billions of dollars in lawsuits against them because what do? They hid, hold on, common theme with tobacco. They hid the fact that they knew it was addictive. So Ohio, lawsuits have destroyed them. But you know what? In Ohio, I think it was a $21 billion or something lawsuit. The fourth quarter of 2019, 2020, when COVID hit, GW Pharmaceuticals made that much in that quarter alone. So what did that do to them, a $21 billion lawsuit? Now we're talking about the real stuff, right? Tobacco, alcohol, and illegal drugs. What's that breakdown? Cocaine, 5,800 people. 5,800 people died from cocaine. Is that a serious epidemic that we have to lock up people and destroy people's lives for? Heroin, and this is heroin, more the heroin stuff as opposed to opiate, 4,019. It's not even that bad. Opiates, again, 49, 50,000. Alcohol, 95. Tobacco, 480,000. Are these things that we should be spending $47 billion on? And obviously the two most dangerous ones are legal. Psychedelic death rates, right? Because we're here at Cannadelics. we want to be able to expand our mind. And based on doing this presentation, I'm going to be filing lawsuits, or not lawsuits necessarily, but so everyone knows, right? Cannabis is getting rescheduled from 1 to 3, hopefully, potentially at some point. For the last 10 years, I've been filing, since 2009, I guess, so a little over, close to 10 years, filing motions to dismiss in my cases, saying that cannabis as a Schedule I substance is unconstitutional because it's arbitrary, capricious, it's not based on fact, reason. Schedule I substance, high potential for abuse, unsafe under doctor's use, I forget the other condition, but it's the most severe category. So when I'm putting this together, and I never really even thought about this before, but let's talk about psychedelic death rates. Extremely rare for mushrooms. Eat them up. And there's Cannadelic. He passed away. He's African guy who does psychedelics and martial arts, but his position is, listen, you have to basically eat your body weight in mushrooms to have sort of a death or a toxic effect. I'm not suggesting eat that much, but don't be afraid to eat 20, 30, 50 grams. LSD, deaths caused by LSD, extremely rare. Extremely rare. MDMA, ecstasy. So they got 1,500 deaths involving synthetic opiates other than methadone, including fentanyl and analogs like that one there, cafentanil, but which some of them may be associated with MDMA. So is this the real drug war that we're fighting? Is this why we're locking up people and spending millions of dollars on incarcerating people and destroying people's lives? Cost of illegal drugs versus alcohol and tobacco. NIDA estimated opiate misuse costs about $78.5 billion a year. Healthcare, addiction treatment, criminal justice. Economic cost of smoking, CDC, $300 billion a year. These are where your tax dollars are going, people. Economic burden on alcohol abuse, $249 billion in 2019. This is where your money's going, and this is what it costs. So it's ridiculous. The drug war. Okay, it doesn't just have an impact on the people that are using drugs, it has an impact on their families as well. Incarceration is the biggest destroyer of the family than pretty much anything else that we have going on. It causes a financial strain, income dropping an average of 22%, and especially in these days and times, it's impossible pulling that out of a family. Incarceration reduces individual annual income. So not only are you and your family screwed while you're in jail, but when you get out, you have a significant reduction in the amount of money that you can earn because of that. And I'm proud to say with our nonprofit organization, Canna, we do a lot of sealing and expungements to try to help people clean up their records and stuff like that, because these things do impact people's lives, not just for the time they're incarcerated. This whole notion, like go do your penance, you're sentenced, and then you're okay. You did, like, it's not like time out. You know, a kid gets put in timeout, they're out of timeout. Okay, they have no restrictions on them. They can do what they want again, right? It's not like that when you're put in jail. That follows you for the rest of your life. And it destroys people, and it destroys families. Children's education. Children are likely to experience disruptions in education and changes in schools, decreased academic performances. There's not a parent in their home a lot more times because there's only one, the other one's in prison, and increased likelihood of dropping out. So these seem like easy fixes where we can continue to evolve and make our community better. Children with incarcerated parents have lower educational attainment compared to their peers. Long-term consequences and future opportunities are impacted by obviously a good start and a good education. It pushes families into poverty, causing inadequate resources for education, school supplies, tutoring, extracurricular activities, and causing educational disruptions in children when we all, right, as a country, children first, we got to take care of our children, but we're destroying them. So again, who's the hypocrite? Addiction rates. Okay, let's talk about really what we're destroying lives for again. Addiction rates in cocaine, 20 to 25%. Heroin, 23%. And some of these do or do not have physical or psychological addiction. Some of them obviously have withdrawal, more harsh withdrawal symptoms than others. Opiates, 23%. Alcohol, 15%. Tobacco, 32%. And I put this one in there just because I think I think it's a killer. Sugar, 75%. And especially the more we learn about our microplastics in our water and our ultra-processed foods and how bad they are, I think it's important to show that our government doesn't care about that, right? This drug war is supposed to be about your safety. It's supposed to be about what's doing best for you to make sure that you know what is right for you. Because that's what it's about. It's about them saying, we know what's better for you. But they don't care about those things that are really impacting society and killing us. Drug addiction rates, and again, going back to everyone's favorite thing here, psychedelics. Psilocybin mushrooms are considered to have a low potential for addiction. I really never met anyone addicted to psychedelics. LSD, considered addictive in some way, but not the same as heroin and cocaine, right? This goes back to a psychological addiction and not other addictions. Same thing with MDMA. You know, and the way I say it, and I saw this show years ago, and it was a show on, basically, they were interviewing people in Amsterdam and comparing, you know, the United States and stuff like that. And he was like, I feel bad for Americans, you know. We have the freedom at least to be able to do things. We have the freedom to do what we want. And, you know, these drug addiction rates for these substances, again, goes back to why I'm going to start challenging it as a Schedule I substance. How are these highly addictive? How are these dangerous to society? How are these causing people to really have detriment in their life? And, you know, there's two different ways I think you can use psychedelics, right? Number one, healing, you know, and which is a lot of talk about that, but I also think exploration, enlightenment, evolution of your own self, of your own mind. And so I think these things, and that's the worst thing I think our government is doing, and I said it for years, the worst thing that the criminalization of cannabis did was that it put cannabis users in the closet. So it's oppression. It's like, we don't want you talking about this. We don't want you going out and saying that you do this, because then we're going to come after you. And really, you know, coming out on this issue was inspired by a book by Carl Hart. He was a former NIDA. Love the book. If you're interested in this topic, definitely read it. He was a NIDA scientist for like 20 plus years. So his job, best job ever, was to administer drugs to people. All kinds of drugs, everything. You know, and see the effects on people. And after doing that for 20 years, he wrote this book, Drugs for Adults. And so that was a big, you know, inspiration of coming out on this and being like, listen, you know, it's time. We have to, as individuals, just like cannabis users start coming out, like, we use psychedelics. We use it for fun. We use it for healing. We use it for trauma. We use it, you know, just for life and evolution and love more and to grow more. And that's what humans are supposed to do, right? To grow. We're not supposed to sit stagnant and stay with the status quo. We got to push the envelope, especially of our mind. You know, and I think the time now more than ever that I was put here for this is to continue this evolution forward. So what this means, 80% of people do not get addicted to drugs. So 100% of people are arrested for this alleged huge crisis for 20% of people that fall into that category that are actually using drugs. That does not sound like sound policy to me. That does not sound like it's a good use of our money. It does not sound like it's humans taking care of humans, and it doesn't sound like what law enforcement is supposed to do, protect and serve, not seek out and destroy. Portugal. So it's not like this isn't happening. And I will say Portugal has been decriminalized for a while. Okay, decriminalization is not what I believe we should do. I think it should be legalization, not decriminalization. But the case of Portugal has been going on for a long time, and they are a model for us to see that this does work. So, overdose deaths. Since, 1990 to 2021, when they decriminalized, they had a 50% reduction in overdose deaths. What else can you say about that? How is that not beneficial? And again, that's not decriminalization. And I don't agree with what Oregon did, so I don't know, Oregon is trying to put the cat back in the bag. They legalized or decriminalized everything, but then they, haven't all allegedly. I've heard that the stories, the media reports are different than actuality, having all these opiate deaths and fentanyl deaths and stuff like that. Well, they didn't set up the system correctly. And I gotta say, I was amazed and shocked and absolutely blessed and to see, I read an article on spring break this year, right? And so Fort Lauderdale was allegedly giving people out test strips that they could put in their drinks to see if they're roofied. Every responsible drug user I know would much rather have their test strips to see if they have fentanyl in their shit if they don't want it, and what's in that. So why don't we start doing that for everything? So as Portugal went, you can see those deaths, 369 in 1999, and obviously they have a totally different population than us. 2011 to 10, 152 and 12, 54, 72, 63, 81. Over the last 20 years, God, my eyes, Portugal cut deaths by over 50%. Decade after decade, and reduce the number of HIV, hepatitis, and cases like that. And if you don't know why that's in there, is because when people are IV drug users and using needles, that's what spreads those diseases. Research in countries like Switzerland have implemented harm reduction strategies, experienced a substantial decrease in overdose deaths, 50% with harm reduction measures. So we're cutting that in half. We're taking our 100,000 down to 50,000 basically overnight. Drug-induced deaths per million population. Look at this one. Does the drug war work? Look at us. We're insane. And this is by per million people. So it's not, just by population. It's per how many people. These are how many drug deaths we have. And I'm sure the stress that we have in this world, in this country, that we put on, and depression and things like that contribute to that in this country. But different policies, reduction in drug violence crime, right? How great is that? There was just a recent study that came out this week that again confirmed that couples who use cannabis are less likely to engage in domestic violence. And I can say as an attorney, I don't think I have ever had one case in 20 years, 22 years, of a domestic violence case that did not involve alcohol and not one that involved cannabis. One of the fondest memories I have, it was like the day after Super Bowl Sunday, right? So Super Monday, I'm in court, and there's literally a whole family in jail for getting into a fight because they were all pissed drunk before the Super Bowl even started. So you had a dad and a son, the two guys, and a mom and a daughter, all four of them tossed in jail, all four of them bruised up and battered from beating on each other. So I want less of that. We know with cannabis, the statistics are showing a significant decrease in alcohol use, especially imbibing in alcohol use to, intoxication. Economic benefits of legalizing, and again, the drug-related violence and the drug-related deaths are significantly decreased. Financial impact. Right? What's the biggest thing everyone needs right now is money, including our country. We're drowning in debt. We're spending our money on other people while our own citizens are starving. And this could be a gateway to a path forward. Great new tax revenue. Cato Institute estimated legalizing could generate over $106 billion in annual budgetary sales from law enforcement and taxes. Reduce the size of the illicit drug market, redirect revenue away from criminal organizations. And I don't have the site there, but up to $100 billion annually from criminal organizations to legal businesses is the estimate on what we can change there. So again, changing the paradigm. We've done it with cannabis, as we've seen, right? And so not only have the cannabis dispensaries increased a lot of revenue, not only in tax dollars, but business dollars, obviously jobs. But when you look at the stats, especially at the beginning, but you're looking at the restaurant sales increase, you're looking at the tourism increase, you're looking at property value increases. All of that comes with cannabis that no one really talks about. But you see it in this chart, and again, this is cannabis, but if we extrapolate that, and obviously cannabis is used much more than any other drugs, all the other drugs combined, but we're talking about significant tax dollars we can generate for this. Safety first. This is my goal. Everyone is walking down the streets living in fear. You never know if you're going to go out to a concert and there's going to be some psycho want to shoot people up. So I really think that the legalization of drugs will do that. As an attorney, you see, you get busted, you have the odor of cannabis, here it leads to a search, now you get busted, now you have a half a dozen cops on the side of the road with you, all cha-ching, 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 taking up their money, taking up their time. For someone, honestly, that left this after an educational day, having a good time, bought some stuff, and, didn't unfortunately stop before the white stop bar, or come to a complete stop. And honestly, none of you guys do it, man. I am a little OCD and I watch traffic all the time because, technically cops can only stop what a reasonable officer would stop somebody for. And none of them do it. And honestly, nobody comes to a complete stop on a right on red or anything. So please do it. Stop before the light line if it's there. Just avoid having problems. Sometimes the best offense is a good defense. If I have a basis to challenge the stop, that's the best way to win the case, and I love doing it. Empty the jails. We spend over $200 billion per year on incarceration of drug offenders for jails. This is absolutely ridiculous, and it goes back to these contracts. People locked up in a cell for using a substance and not hurting anybody. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about not condoning DUIs. We're not talking about, the cannabis user who gets so high they got to go rob the store to get their weed. But we're not talking about those types of situations, right? You commit a burglary, you commit a theft, again, you're still going to go to jail. But we're talking about for possession, for your own use of the substance. Because 90% of these arrests are for people getting pulled over, leaving a club, a bar, or speeding, or whatever, and a dog coming around or them smelling something. So a study published in the Journal of Public Economics estimated we'd save about $41.3 billion in law enforcement and criminal justice costs. And I can tell you, in a criminal court case, 90% of the people in there are in there for drugs. So we're sitting there for hours on these drug cases, one after another for possession cases. And it's not just young kids, it's all ages. And that's the thing, like DUIs and drug charges are your 18-year-olds up to your 70-year-olds. Impact of providing clean and safe and legal drugs. Supervised injection sites, reduces the harm, prevention for infectious diseases. Minimize people using illicit or dangerous substances, right? So the fentanyl mixed in and stuff like that. We got to get rid of that. So what I say is let them legalize, educate, test, tax, medicate, right? So if we have these testing and you're going to these stores like the MMTCs to buy your drugs, they're tested and they're clean. A study in the International Journal of Drug Policy provided that for using this type of harm reduction cost, they saved about 17,250 American dollars, 15,799 pounds per patient. And you obviously saw the numbers on the amount of people that we have, especially for opiates that are in there. Caring and compassionate approach. This is where we have to go, right? Instead of healing people. And this is the great thing about drugs, right? Is that if you are a drug addict and you go to a rehab and you turn yourself in, you go to a rehab, you get into rehab, you help yourself, no crime, no foul, right? You're not getting arrested, your life's not being destroyed. But if you happen to be driving down the street or walking down the street and get stopped by a cop who's got a bad day, there you go, your life's destroyed now, even though both of those people are doing the same thing. So this is really where we have to go. We got to clean up our communities and destroy the cartels. That's the bottom line, right? They did it with alcohol prohibition, and it's like, is not this the same thing, right? They ended up getting rid of that. It obviously started mafia, criminal organizations around alcohol. Walgreens was one of the first alcohol medical providers. They were providing medical alcohol back then. But we got to be able to take these people out, and start moving towards compassion and helping and caring about people. Implement affecting regulations on testing. No one should have to get bad drugs. Same thing with strategies on dosaging and use. So you know what you're going to use. And this is the problem we have with edibles right now, right? All these bad stories and horror stories about edibles. Okay, yeah, you eat a 100 milligram bar, you're going to be messed up. But you know what? And I equate it to alcohol, right? If you had no clue what alcohol was or how it affected your body, and you went and you drank a bottle of Everclear, you're going to be, as our legislature calls it, overdosed. And with alcohol, you actually may die, right? And they're calling it overdose with cannabis. But isn't it just education about it? Right? Because it's like the same thing. It's not overdose, it's a hangover. Isn't that what we call it? Isn't that like I'm blackout drunk? Isn't that what we call it? So why are they calling it an overdose with cannabis? But so it's education. And I think the same thing with drugs, right? Everyone has seen Pulp Fiction, right? Okay, we get that famous scene when she goes out, right? Because she goes into his pocket, she thinks she's getting a bag of cocaine. She's like, I'm gonna give myself a nice fat line. And it happens to be heroin. Big difference between the two. So, those things have to be known to people, and that education will prevent these overdoses. And Carl Hart says it in his book, and he talks about this. He's like, a lot of overdoses can be prevented, especially with opiates. We don't know if, are some of those intentional suicides, but a lot of them are dosing. People go home and they take dose, they don't feel anything. Or with Ambien, right? They'll take an Ambien, they'll black out because they don't go to sleep right away, and they'll take another Ambien and will forget about it and end up driving the car, fugue state, passed out, not knowing what's going on, and end up in jail. Investments, right? We put our money, all that prison money, into rehab facilities, into care facilities, into helping and protecting people, right? Another thing I think with drugs, right? When you're doing heroin, you're doing cocaine, you're doing, unless you're with your friends, you're doing it in the closet, right? You're not like out in the open doing it and showing people you're doing it, unlike alcohol, unlike tobacco. So you can have those interdictions, right, with those people because you're aware of what's going on. And I think when we get to move by that and we get rid of that stereotype, because so many people who are addicted to drugs, and I got to tell you, I've asked a lot of people, I've only really had one client in 22 years that was like glad, like, yeah, this is it. I'm happy. I don't have to work. I get money from a trust fund. I'm doing drugs every day. I enjoy it. But 90% of the people are like, no, I don't want to be like this. So it's not like people in many ways, especially with how opiate addiction starts, right? And I remember seeing the commercial with the dentist, and he's like, well, we just started going from the pharmaceutical companies came to us, oh, this is better. This will relieve their pain better. So they just went from, one substance to the opiates and started giving it for a tooth pain. Can't imagine getting that for a tooth pain when I was a kid. So, we have to get away from that and put this towards education, proper dosing, and safety for our people. A comprehensive approach combines legalization for drug safety, testing, evidence-based addiction treatment, prevention measures to mitigate the harm and reduce the rates of reduction. And if we throw in psychedelics right with that, I think we're good, because we know now that is probably being one of the most promising medicines to get off of addiction and opiates and stuff. So it all comes full circle. Nature wins. Summary and conclusion. Compassionate future forward. It's time to lead with caring and love for people and acceptance of their addiction and helping them, as opposed to ostracizing them, pushing them out of society and labeling them for their lives. It has done nothing to curb drug use. It has nothing, as you see, those addiction rates continue to rise, has nothing to reduce addiction rates and nothing to reduce opiate deaths. It's about time to abolish the DEA. They just destroy people's lives, destroy the cartels, end the fentanyl epidemic, right? That's gone unless you're choosing to use it, and create billions of dollars in tax revenue and put law enforcement to stopping real crimes like violence. They should be out walking the beat again, making sure shootings aren't happening, making sure people are safe. And Q&A, any questions?
Thank you. Oh, thank you. My name is India. So I wanted to understand your why, and I heard it, I think you're tired of seeing a waste of resources. And as an attorney, a criminal attorney, a criminal defense attorney?
Yeah, I do a little bit of everything. Yeah,
so it almost comes off, I would say, a little bit idyllic because, and I'm sure you get that a lot, over 70% of ad revenue is pharmaceutical marketing. So they get a lot of money. I'm from Indiana. I'm from Indianapolis, so Eli Lilly has the entire city basically in a headlock. They control a lot of what we do, what we have going on. And we also know, like you said, private prison money. So you have these two things. You have money for big pharma and you have money for private prisons. And that incentivizes getting people addicted to drugs and then incarcerating them for using drugs that the government is not getting tax dollars from. So understanding all of that and your why, what is your next step in getting us closer to what you would like to see while understanding what you are up against?
So as far as the why thing, my why thing is really, I think it's just a better compassion and caring way of this issue. Being a criminal defense attorney, I deal with people who've dealt with addiction for the last 20 years. 90% of my criminal cases are drug cases, right? I really don't do violent crime. I try to stay away from that. So, who knows? Just, this is, just like how cannabis evolves, right? The first step is education, is getting the knowledge out, and then getting acceptance. So that's where we're here now. I ran for office in 2022. I may run again in 2026. So continuing to evolve this issue and really evolve the human race, right? Because that's what it's about. It's about looking at people differently, looking at things differently, and what makes a person crazy? Doing something wrong and then continuing to do the same thing over and over again. And we've been doing that with the drug war for 30 years. So all of those things lead to it. I just feel like this is my passion, this is my dream, this is why I'm here, to push people forward, to enlighten them, to grow emotionally, to get more connected, and to live like humans should be as opposed to animals fighting each other for everything. To say that there's not enough resources in the world is absurd. To say that there's not enough ways for us to come together and work together to end all the things that we can is insane to me. Can you imagine all the great minds getting together and be like, hey, let's end the energy crisis? Done. And I think that's what we have to do. And this is, I think, a step of bringing back our freedom. Honestly, I think it's a freedom issue, especially of our mind with psychedelics, right? No one should be able to tell me I can't explore my mind. So it's a lot of those things. And I hate people getting destroyed from being arrested. It just doesn't, it's not serving any purpose. And now we have the proof and the stats to show it's not.
My name is Laura Hartman. I am a former VA nurse, and I have been working on VA reform for over a decade. So this specifically is going to relate to being a veteran advocate. What are your thoughts around the reschedulization, specifically with legislators working on a national level to impact and declassify?
Are you talking about cannabis?
Yes, I am talking about cannabis.
So I am mixed on this issue. So I think rescheduling is great to a Schedule 3. Ask me what it does for you guys. Nothing really. I think the two potential impacts it has on everyday people are gun rights, right? Which we're already seeing that change and evolve with all the new gun law cases across the country and our U.S. Supreme Court's stance on gun laws, and maybe a potentially employee rights, right? So I deal with a lot of employee cases, and their biggest issue, well, it's a federal Schedule I substance, so therefore we can't allow it as employees, even though any prescription drug you can, or if you had marijuana, you can. So I think those are really the only two possible ways that it helps the common people. Otherwise, it helps the people that some people don't like, but the big businesses, right? It helps the Trulievs of the world, all the multi-state operators, because it should open up banking, which I think is 100% right thing to do, which I don't think is a bad thing for us, because I think it opens up banking, then it opens up their money to do what else everyone else does to get legislation passed, right? Let's throw some lobbying money at it, and then that'll happen. So I hope it'll happen. I've been hearing that we may look at it like it's going to happen soon. Most people are saying it may be a couple years. Other people who are trying to use it as a wedge for the election are saying it'll get done before November. So, it's a game they're playing with people's lives for no reason, for a plan. And to me, it makes me sick. So if you don't know, I ran as a Republican in 2022 on the freedom agenda. They didn't like me too much. So I'm now NPA. Because I'm just kind of sick of politics in all circumstances, but unfortunately we need it. So that's my position on 3. It's a political gain, and I think Trump could end it easily by saying, yep, let's support it, decriminalize it, and he would end that whole wedge that's going on. So I wish it would do more. I wish they would deschedule, but it's a step in the right direction.
All right, we have time for a few more questions. Does anybody else have a question for Mike? Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mike. Could you go into a little bit more detail and unpack how legalization affects drug deaths and all the long list of negatives that come without it? How does that happen?
So if you're talking about how does it happen on drug deaths, right? So number one, it becomes an educational issue. I think with legalization, and this isn't even something Portugal and stuff did, and I don't know how they're dealing with it, but I think the testing of it is an important aspect. A lot of people die, especially we're seeing now, right? They're doing heroin or they're doing something and there's fentanyl mixed into it. So those are parameters in there. But think about it, right? When you go into a casino, what do you see everywhere? You have a gambling problem, call 1-800. My vision would be that kind of like when you go into one of the MMTCs here, they have a consultation lounge. They would be able to provide services for people that have those addiction rates. But it's education. It's and we saw it with tobacco, right? So Florida for a while was one of the most successful states in the country in reducing teen tobacco use. It was education, cessation programs, right, getting them off of it, and strict rules on who purchases and who gets it. So I think really that model is shown to be effective in all aspects, you know, and I think it should be used just like it is with tobacco. And you know, maybe my mom didn't know the ills of tobacco, but certainly people who pick it up today absolutely should know what it does to you, right? So, and same thing with alcohol. You know, it becomes a freedom of choice thing as far as those aspects of it. But I think that those, again, most drug users that I've used, that people are addicted, you know, one started with opiates, a lot of them from prescription drugs. I think the stats are like 80% of people start that way. So that's a medical problem. Right, we loop that into illegal drugs right now, but that's really a pharmaceutical medical problem, right? That we are getting, that illegal drugs are getting blamed for the way that I see it, right? Because people are buying it and getting it off label, that's why. But so, you know, most of those deaths are caused by opiates that I don't consider a legal drug, you know? My drug dealer, or at least back in the day, right, he's not selling opiates, you know? I get my weed, my mushrooms, my coke, you know, but that's about it. So, you know, I think that those programs, and it's about compassion, man. You know, it's just about compassion. You know, when you're around people who are addicted and arrested to substances and you get to know them and just their whole mindset is like, my life is destroyed, I have nothing. Like, they're in that cycle. And you can't end that cycle by sticking them in jail. And I have to say, I don't like drug court because it includes jail and you got to get arrested to do it. But it's proven that drug court works. So you know what that means? That's proven that treatment works. So we don't have to do it with, you know what the hook over your head is? It's getting thrown in jail, you know, as opposed to you relapsing and having to come out in your family. You know, and it kills me because people violate probation, like, and you know, most of the drugs, you get relapse. It's a term in rehabilitation. It's a medical term. It means something. People relapse. It's a known. So why are you punishing them by throwing them in jail for going through the process? It'd be like punishing someone from purging on ayahuasca. Come on.
All right. Anybody else have a question for Mike? Pablo.
Thank you, Mike, for all your information and knowledge. That was awesome. My question is, you know, plant medicine, especially psilocybin shrooms, especially in my journey, has been very powerful and healing. So as a collective, how do we express our feelings, how great this plant medicine is? Who do we need as leaders in the community? Who do we need to express the greatness of this plants to? Do we need to talk to law enforcement? Do we need to talk to government? Do we need to talk to institutions, corporations? Like, who should we be talking to, and what levels, local, state, federal, for leaders to start making an impact?
Well, you know, short answer is keep following me, man. Let's keep on pushing this journey. You know what we've been doing. Because I don't know anyone else that's doing it. I don't know anyone else that's talking about it. But join the movement. Let's get this going, and let's keep pushing it forward. Because, you know, once it's out, it's out. So keep going to events. Keep speaking. I know we're going to keep on pushing it. Our platform for 26 is going to be pushing it. And I think that's the only way we can do. Get like-minded people together. And get them on board to stop being afraid of coming out of the closet on it, speaking out about it, say, I love, I live, I'm successful because I like to use drugs.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions from Mike, one more?
This is more like a personal question. So if I'm out in the park foraging for mushrooms and I find some great ones and I take it home and I use them, what's the legality with Florida about doing that? And is there any repercussions from doing that?
So, you know, technically mushrooms or psilocybin is illegal. You know, if you get it in the fresh form and things like that, and it becomes like, and I equate it to like nitrous, right? So if you know what nitrous is, like laughing gas type of stuff, they also sell it at Party City for make your own whipped cream, right? So it's kind of like the same thing, right? It's kind of like your Coke can. You know, if you're not using it for illegal purposes, like exploring your own mind, then it's technically could be legal. I don't know, it's psilocybin, it's just a mushroom here, right? Just like your nitrous tank is, or your whipped cream canister is legal until you use it for an illegal use. Same thing with your Coke can, right? So it's that gray area that you have. And if you are picking them fresh, I would, you know, two things I would say. Number one, I don't know what it is. I picked these mushrooms, I don't know what they are. So they have to prove knowledge of substance. And do the same thing with hemp and cannabis. Whatever you have, if you don't have cannabis in your packaging from the dispensary, I bought hemp, I thought it was hemp, give me a defense. So that's what I would say.
All right, great question, Pablo. Well, you know, here at Cannadelic, we have a huge conscious community of people with everything from products to legalities to integration. And all of these are important pieces of what I'd like to call, you know, our plant medicine revolution. You know, things are changing. It is moving slowly. But with leaders like Mike, with leaders like yourselves that are out here, we can share these experiences with our community and start changing minds little by little. You know, it's not just take this as a substance, as a Band-Aid. You know, the root cause of addiction sometimes is much more deeper than the substances that are being used for that. So as we start finding these alternative therapies, we're able to work with these things and work together and change the laws through the progress and through science and through everything else. And you know, our next panel, Mike's going to be on it as well. We're going to talk about the next steps in legalizing adult use cannabis here in the state of Florida. Something that we started on over 10 years ago when I came into this industry as a patient myself. So, Mike, thank you very much. I know Jody is here. I'd like everybody that is going to be on our A2 panel to get up on the stage. If you want to grab a quick run to the restroom, we're going to be starting in about 5 minutes. I'm just waiting on Kelly's coming here. That's my